Will you remark? Senator Winfield.
Good evening, Madam President.
Good evening.
I'm supportive of increasing the minimum wage and this bill. The last time that we actually increased the minimum wage in the state, I was the chair of the Labor Committee. And right around that time, I remember standing with people talking about a $15 wage. That was 2014. So I recognize that there are people who are concerned with the speed with which we are moving to minimum wage of $15 in several years from now. But when we're done with this, we will be nearly a decade after I was having that conversation as the chair of the Labor Committee. I wanted to be eloquent, but I'm tired, both physically and mentally. And so I'm just going to tell a story, because when we have the minimum wage debate, there are often stories told in this chamber about people's first jobs. None of us are extremely young, so usually those are from stories from a time a little bit ago, including myself at this point. But I want to talk about the concept of a living wage as it relates to the minimum wage. So my mother had a really good job that paid her a living wage. But she found herself in a situation where that living wage didn't work out the way that it should, given all of the other things that had happened to her. And we were surrounded by a lot of people who were struggling to make it. And because of the situation she found herself in when my father had left us and had debts and a whole bunch of other stuff, we struggled. So I know what it is to try to make it. And I want to tell you what it can mean in a person's life. So we have a lot of conversations around this circle about the impact that the bills we put forward have on people's lives. We have a lot of conversations about a variety of topics, one of which is education, and it has been a passion of mine since I got here. And in my life, the fact that my mother had the struggle that she had, which of course then is my struggle, it meant that when I went to school, I didn't go to school in the community I lived in, because that community, given how much money we made, where we were able to live, was not a community that I would ever stand here today if I went to the school in that community. And so we pretended to go somewhere else. We pretended to live somewhere else so that we could go to school there. And when I came home, because of the way that the community worked, I would find myself on the ground floor going to do my homework. And this talks about the opportunities that people have. And when I'm on the ground floor going to do my homework in my apartment, I have to make it there, of course. And so the only two ways to get there are through the elevator or the stairs. And this has to do with how much money people make and the conditions they live in. The elevator is as you know, it's an elevator. It's a regular elevator, except this elevator almost always is without light. And this elevator usually has urine in it. And much of the time, it has somebody riding on top of the elevator because they're looking for somebody that they can make a little money from, not in the way you and I make money at our jobs. And the stairs is a very similar condition. And so, yes, because my mother doesn't have enough money to live well, and I'm not talking luxuriously, I'm just talking live well. Because she doesn't have that money, the experience I have as a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid is the experience of having these things that I have to do in order to open the door to my home to do my homework. When we talk about the minimum wage, and we should be talking about a living wage at the very least, when we talk about it, these are the things that we don't talk about in this circle, the experiences people have. That expediency with which some of us think we should be moving is because of that. And I hear people oftentimes say, well, the minimum wage shouldn't be considered to be a living wage because it was never meant to be that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, actually said something different than that. I'm going to quote him. He says, "No business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages," as he's talking about the minimum wage, "to its workers has any right to continue in this country, And then they went and passed a law that created a minimum wage. It's clear from the historical record that the intent was that people would be able to live well. We're here talking about a sub-living wage. That's what this fight is for. This fight accurately is for a sub-living wage, because in the state of Connecticut, right now, the living wage is larger than when we get to the minimum wage of $15. What we are fighting for is for people to be able to exist in conditions like the conditions that I had to grow up in. And hoping that we can get there. What we are saying to people is we had experiences where we learned the value of work. We learned and had pride in that work that we did. That's good. That's nice. Let me tell you the experiences of the young people I talk to right now. They get that first check and they want to have all the pride and the value that we had. They look at that check, that they sit down, and they don't have a little cash in their pocket, because the point of getting a check for them wasn't to do what we did. The point of getting a check for them was to help with the house. And when they look at that check and they see what's in that check, they haven't done much to help in that house. And the sense they have is not a sense of pride. It's a continued and furthered sense of desperation. But we are fighting to make sure that it stays that way. That they understand that they are going to continue to be locked into a system that does not allow them to help out in that house in the way they had hoped they could. And I said I was tired, but I'm not as tired as that mother who has to work all those jobs. We keep acting like it's teenagers that we're talking about. It's not what we're talking about. And if we're going to have a conversation, then we might as well just say what it is. We are talking about people who are trying to live, and what we are saying is it's okay for you to have a substandard wage, a less than living wage. We are saying that the wage we talked about 5 years ago is not good enough today, and maybe to some of us not good enough in years from now, 4.5 years from now. It's unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. You know, the situation that I described to you is about 5 minutes of my day as a child. I won't bother to explain to you what the rest of the day was like. But when I've explained my day thoroughly to people who are adults right now, many of them tell me they couldn't make it through that day. And as a legislature, we are saying to people, it's difficult. There are all these things you have to consider. Mechanization has been coming since we've had work. Mechanization is coming whether or not we have a minimum wage increase or not. It's a part of what happens. This technology advance has never not been the case. It's also not a reason not to increase the minimum wage. You know, I've talked about my mother quite a bit here. My mother passed partially because of the wage she made. You know, we talk about what we should be doing and how we should do it, and my mother was one of those people who recognized that as a parent she had a responsibility. And I'm not just talking about the responsibility to raise me up and send me out into the world, but a responsibility to be present while she was working that job. I was thinking about it as I was thinking about this. My mother never took a single vacation in the whole time that I knew her so that she could make it work for us. And when my mother died, she died because she literally worked herself to death. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I could not possibly stand here and look at the people of this state and say, that's okay for any of them. That's not okay for not one single person. But people are going to do that because they're going to do what's necessary for them and their children. And what I hope we do as a body is what is necessary for them and their children, and that is to increase the minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Winfield. Will you remark?